Well, good morning, everyone. Let's go ahead and start the St. Lucie Public Schools Workshop, January 24th, 9 o'clock. And we're going to have a stand for Pledge of Allegiance, do a Treasure Hope pledge, and then we're just going to have a moment of silence for the activities that took place during Martin Luther King. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our Treasure Hope pledge. As an adult and treasure hunter, I am committed to search for all skills and intelligence that exist in all children and youth. I believe all children are capable of success, no exceptions. Moment of silence, please. Thank you. Please be seated. All righty, board members. We've got a full pack of information to go through. We're going to first talk about and work out, massage our policy towards speakers, unscheduled and scheduled speakers. And then the second thing we're going to discuss is we're going to go over a goal. Actually, the superintendent has 4 goals, but we're going to focus on goal 1, progress monitoring for the year, and he'll cover that more in depth. But right now, I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Prince.
All right, good morning, Chairman Ingersoll, board members. Good to see everybody this morning. I also want to thank staff for being here. We're going to have a couple of staff members present today. And the first thing we're going to talk about, and this is really Dr. Wild, we have gone with Neola policies, and that kind of aligns with policies throughout the state and the nation, but all of our policies are kind of aligned with all the districts in the state. So in this process, this is a very time-consuming process with staff, and literally everybody you see sitting here is in one way, shape, or form involved in rewriting all of these policies so that we're aligned. It's a big project. We'll be bringing all of these policy revisions to the board as one this summer. But one of the things that I need some board clarity and guidance with is regarding scheduled speaker time limits and unscheduled speakers. So whenever we looked at Neola's policy, we noticed that there were a lot of differences that were very unique as a district with regards to some of the things we do. And as we looked and did some research across the state, I wanted to bring before the board some recommendations and potential options that we would have with making some adjustments so that we're kind of lined up with where most of the 67 other counties are in the state of Florida. So with that being said, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Wild, and she'll walk you through it.
Good morning, Board Chair Ingersoll, board members, Superintendent Prince. Happy to be here again to discuss this topic of speaker time limits in terms of board policy. And as Dr. Prince shared, we are going through that Neola revision right now, and a lot of those changes are simply changing policy numbers, changing format, but not content. If we are changing anything with content, it would come before you for discussion and approval. And so we are using our existing policy to have this discussion about these 2 potential changes moving forward so that this one will be already, will have already come to conclusion. So the first issue around scheduled speakers is actually not time limits. It's more about the process of how somebody gets on the list to be an unscheduled speaker. Currently, our policy says prior to the conclusion of the opening section of the meeting. And Lydia, do they have the copies? Yes. Okay, so if you look at option 1, and it's actually, this issue is the same on both option 1 and option 2, and you go to the 3rd page at the very bottom, you will see that our existing policy says prior to the conclusion of the opening section of the meeting. And what that means is when you're doing your opening of the meeting, people are still coming in, they're looking for the form, and then they're coming up to the dais to find Mrs. Harrison to hand it to her to get on the unscheduled speaker list. And we noticed when we were looking at how other districts do this that most of them have that defined a little bit differently to make it a little bit more clear for the citizens. And the one that we thought was closest to what we currently have but would make it a lot clearer is this, what we've proposed here, which is prior to the start of the meeting. That way you won't have individuals approaching the dais once you've already started the meeting. People won't be looking for where to turn that form in. It will all be handled before your meeting starts. There were some districts that did it earlier than that, like 15 minutes before, but we wanted to give the potential unscheduled speakers time to get here and be here at the beginning of your meeting. So that is our proposal on that one small issue, is just the adjustment from prior to the conclusion of the opening section to prior to the start of the meeting.
Dr. Waugh, may I interject here?
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure the board members understand why this is kind of important. It's really the safety of the board. Whenever you have folks that are just walking up to the dais, from a security standpoint, this is problematic once a meeting has started, and we would rather, from our security there, it just makes them real nervous when they see people just walking up, because in this day and age, we just think from a safety standpoint and to align ourselves with where the other districts are, this just makes the most sense to have this done before the meeting starts. So that's kind of the biggest justification, not just that we're aligning with other districts, but I just wanted you to understand the justification for that. Thank you.
Thank you. And then the other part of this policy that we're taking a look at is the time limits that speakers have. And this is our current policy: 5 minutes for any person that is scheduled to speak, 3 minutes for unscheduled, and 3 minutes in a public hearing. And our goal is to encourage people to come speak, exercise their right to be heard, and with issues that garner a lot of public input, you can have a lot of people coming. And in order to encourage more people to speak, we wanted to be in more alignment with what we see across the state in more districts. And so we have option 1 and option 2. There's a slight difference. Both of them, and it's option 1 is, this is the only recommended change, is that it would be 3 minutes instead of 5 for scheduled speakers. That way, if there is something that a lot of people want to speak to, everybody can be heard. You have less redundancy in what they say because they're very careful to make sure that their message is clear and succinct. Although 3 minutes is still a long time. So when we looked at that chart that we passed out last time, we did see that most districts have shortened that to 3 minutes. 5 was an outlier. There was some discussion last time of how you handle it when an issue brings out a very large crowd. So option 2 is 3 minutes for your typical scheduled speaker, but with a provision for a large crowd, and this specific one comes from Brevard County. There are other versions of this, but in Brevard County, they say if they have 10 scheduled or unscheduled speakers, either category, then they will shorten the time limit to 2 minutes if there's between 11 and 20 people that want to speak, and they'll shorten it to 1 minute if there's more than 21 speakers. So that's option 2, is to add that additional piece. There's other ways that people attempt to shorten the total length of speakers, but they actually cut people off and don't allow them to speak. So we weren't recommending those options, like a 30-minute time limit no matter what. We didn't recommend anything that would not allow somebody to speak. So the recommendation here in option 2 is just to tier it. So if it's a very large crowd, everybody still has a chance to be heard. So option 1 is shortening the 5 to 3, and option 2 is shortening the 5 to 3 and adding a provision for crowded meetings.
Now, can you go back one slide? I just wanted to make a couple of comments to this so that the board members could understand. Go to option 1, Dr. Wild, if you would. So just so you understand the reasoning and the justification behind this, is let's say you have 20 people that want to come and speak on a topic, okay? So that 20 folks would each have 3 minutes, but if they had 5 minutes under the current proposal, we're talking about an hour and 40 minutes that it would take to get through if they all use 5 minutes. So under this, 3 minutes is still a lot of time, but 20 folks, it would only take an hour to get through their comments, which would actually encourage more people to come and speak, because who wants to come and wait an hour and 45 minutes to speak on a topic under our current policy, okay? And to me, it actually encourages more folks to come and speak. Now go to option 2, and this would be my recommendation, and I know we're not voting, it's just I wanted to hear from the board. Option 2 is really about a revision that includes 11 to 20 speakers would be 2 minutes, and 21 or more speakers would be 1. The downside of that is just pure chance that if you show up a little bit later, depending on when you turn your form in, you may only get a minute. And I think that there's some inequity in that and some unfairness with that proposal, especially if you've got a lot of people that want to come and speak on a topic. So I wanted to hear from board members before we move forward with an absolute recommendation and a policy. And with that, I'll open it up to questions. Go ahead, Dr. Wild.
Oh, hold on a second.
One thing I would add is that we have had meetings historically that are crowded about contentious issues. The time to visit this topic is when you're not in the middle of one of those issues. And, we're clearly not. We're not having meetings like this right now, so this is a good time to have these discussions.
But before we take any questions, Dr. Wild, are you done?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Let's take some questions then. I got lots of them. Any questions? Dr. Mills, microphone.
Option 1. Go over option 1 again, please. Just simply what you're
Yes. Option 1 only has 2 changes. The first one is that people would have, for unscheduled speakers, they would turn in their form prior to the beginning of the meeting, as opposed to after it has already started. And that scheduled speakers would have 3 minutes to speak. They currently have 5. That's it, those 2 changes.
Okay, with that being said, people would come in like what, 15 minutes before the meeting starts, 10 minutes, what is that? The
Once you
beginning
call the
prior.
start of the meeting, that's the cutoff.
Right, but what I'm saying is, that's the cutoff to sign up.
Yes.
Okay, and then what else?
And then if they are a scheduled speaker, they would have 3 minutes. They would have been notified
Do they-
already that they have 3.
Do they speak before the meeting starts, you're saying?
No,
No,
it doesn't change
okay.
how we do scheduled and unscheduled in
So
terms of.
unscheduled speakers would still be after, at the end of the meeting,
Correct.
but the cutoff time to actually speak as an unscheduled speaker will be at the beginning of the meeting.
That is correct.
Okay. And that's what you're proposing?
That's the option 1 proposal.
Uh-huh.
The option 2 proposal just adds that piece at the bottom that's highlighted, and that is that if we have a larger crowd that wants to speak, their time gets shortened to 2 minutes. If we go over 21 speakers, it gets shortened to 1. So that would be the addition of option 2.
I think the only problem I would have with this is changing the scheduled speakers to 3 minutes and not having the same as the unscheduled speakers. 3 minutes for scheduled, 3 minutes for unscheduled.
Yes, that's correct.
I have an issue with that. Everything else I'm comfortable with, but I have an issue with that because if people actually take the time out to schedule, I believe that they should have something different as far as a longer length of time. I'm thinking even 4 minutes instead of 3 minutes, but something that distinguishes that they are a scheduled speaker.
The big thing about the scheduled speaker, though, Dr. Mills, I just want to remind you, with scheduled speakers, they're broadcast. You're going to be part of the television broadcast, where the unscheduled speakers are not.
Yes, and we've been doing that ever
Yeah,
since I've been
right.
on this board, so I'm
Yeah.
aware of that.
So I just wanted you to be aware, and also with moving 5 to 3 minutes, There were only a couple of districts in the state that had longer than 3 minutes, and we were trying to be more aligned with where kind of everybody else was. But this is an important discussion to hear your thoughts, but that was the justification with regards to reducing it to 3, to kind of be more in alignment with where everybody else was.
Well, I'm interested in hearing more comments and thoughts from the rest of the board as well on this.
Anybody else?
Mr. Chair, I think we got into this discussion 2 or 3 meetings ago at length and went over this pretty good, and I wanted to change it at that time. The past 20 years, all the boards that I've been on are 3 minutes, and on the city council 20 years ago, it was 5 minutes in the very beginning. We changed it to 3 and found that we had more speakers. They got their point across pretty quick. If you can't get across in 3 minutes, then I guess you have to come back into another meeting. I don't know, whatever. But we did have more people speak. People didn't have to wait as long. And this is what everyone else is using, and I think it encourages even more speakers. And I make a motion that we incorporate option 2 revision in our speakers schedule.
Okay, any other questions, or? Mrs. Richardson?
Are we asking questions or are we having a discussion? Or it's one and the same?
One and the same. We're
Okay.
here just to
So,
massage it.
all right, thank you. So, in terms of, I guess, submitting request form, right? For me, this is saying that you submitted prior, the revision is you submitted prior to the meeting, which normally we have it submitted during the meeting.
Yes,
Right?
that's right. Before we get to any actual business, so during the first part of the meeting, the recognitions and so forth, people are still coming up and looking for Mrs. Harrison.
Okay, awesome. All right, so prior to the meeting, the issue that I have with this is the meeting starts at 5. Most people leave work at 5. So they are trying to get here for the meeting. So go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, that's typically about a 5-minute difference, because once you start your official business, nobody else can turn anything in. It's really to give people more clear guidelines about when. Once the meeting is called, so people would know that there's a time certain. Right
Okay.
now, that time varies depending on what the agenda looks like.
I get that, but my thing is the meeting starts at 5. We are struggling to get here for 5. They have to get here before 5, or, right, to get it, no?
Yes, 4:59 and seconds, yes.
Okay.
Right at 5.
Before 5, right? So if the meeting was at 6, then I would say, knock yourself out, that's fine. But it's at 5 o'clock when most people are trying to get here. That's why we have, I would think, scheduled and unscheduled speakers, because the unscheduled speakers normally are the ones that, like at the last minute, want to have something to say. That's my, okay. So the timing, I think if it was different, it would be okay with me. The next thing is, we're talking about security for the board, right? I would say at that point, therefore, then, that we have security in the room. So if they come after 5 and they would like to fill out a petition to speak, then have security bring it up. They're in the room, have them bring it up, so then we won't have any security issues with the board. And my other question, whatever, it would be, what is the time of the other meetings in Brevard County, Palm Beach County, Indian River County? What time do they start? Anybody know that? Is it at 5 o'clock as well?
I'll answer that. It's normally consistent around, it's about 5 o'clock. If you've got Orange County, they would start at 3 o'clock, and they would do work business at 3, and then regular board meeting at 5. Palm Beach County, I'm just saying my experience, but most school districts, it's 5 o'clock. I'd be happy to research that, but I can tell you that that's pretty consistent around the state.
Okay, and that's fine. So let me just go over to, now, we are talking about option 1, or revision option 1. The 3 minutes, the only change is from 5 to 3. That's it.
That's correct.
Okay. And the option 2 is, don't mean to be redundant, but have just 3 minutes, and then we have the 2 minute and the 1 minute. So basically, all we're doing is changing everybody, like Dr. Mills says, from 3 to 5 minutes. Well, I have to agree with Dr. Mills that if we are, that they go to the effort 7 days ahead of time to speak, they have something to say. And I think that we need to hear what they have to say. And 3 minutes is a long time, but 5 minutes is I think, is worthy for us to listen if they're going to go through all the hoops to get to here. The unscheduled, and I understand also that the scheduled speakers are taped, the unscheduled speakers are not taped, which is, up for another discussion. But because I do believe that it should all be taped, scheduled or unscheduled, it should be on tape. And then reducing it, when, normally we don't have, as long as I've been on the board, 1 or 2 times when we have a lot of people here, but it's not a lot of people are actually coming up to speak necessarily, so these are exceptions rather than the rule. These are exceptions rather than the rule as far as I'm concerned. So that's my discussion.
Dr. Mills? 2 times.
I can definitely understand and agree with if there's 10 to 20 speakers, limited to 2 minutes. If there's 21 or more speakers, limited to 1 minute. I get that because we'll be here all night long if we didn't do that. So I can see that very clearly. I'm just hesitant about I've been here on the board now for 12 years, and we've always gave people 5 minutes if they were scheduled. So I'm hesitant on that part to move that to 3 minutes, and I get what you're saying in regards to, you said the majority of the districts are 3 minutes for the speakers. Is that what you said, Dr. Prince? So.
Yes, ma'am.
So I just, I'm just hesitant about that, moving that 5 to 3. Because, and I want to hear if anybody has anything else they want to say about it. I'm hesitant about it. I'm not completely against it. But I do want to make sure that we are giving our people here in St. Lucie County what we've been giving them. So I'm hesitant to take that away from them. I feel like I'm taking something away from St. Lucie County and how we've done things.
But just to confirm what I'm hearing here, that I'm hearing some reluctance on the scheduled speakers from 5 to 3 minutes, but I'm also hearing that you're open to option 2, the revision of limiting that time to 2 and 1 minute the more speakers you have? Okay. All right.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
could we also clarify that this is not an immediate change? This would be for the 23-24 school year, so there's ample time for us to, if we choose to make changes. for
That's
those
correct.
changes to be
This
given.
would not come before the board until July or June?
We haven't finalized that
Okay.
yet with Neola, but we would
Okay.
incorporate it in the Neola changes, so it's all at once, and it would be for next school year.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
the 5 o'clock issue is a separate issue from the motion that I made, and I think we've had this before the board and voted on it 2 times before already. And just as not a caveat, but a remark, from 20 years ago, the old board, the city council, we actually moved our meeting up earlier and had a better we had more people come to the meeting. But that's a separate issue if you want to
It is a
discuss
separate
it.
issue.
The motion I made is for
Yeah.
option
What-
2, which
Yeah.
is, which most districts in the state do, and it's always worked on all the other boards that I've been on, and it does encourage more speakers. It absolutely does.
No.
So I have a motion before the,
Yeah, I know you have a motion, and this is just opportunity for us just to keep on massaging it. We're not taking any motions today, because there's still some things in here that I feel that we need to discuss that wasn't
Yeah,
brought out.
I'm not bringing an agenda item, a voting item to the board today.
Nah,
It's
that's-
just, yeah, because
yeah.
also Molly's not here, that should happen in a board meeting, so I just wanted some input.
Yeah.
That's all, Mr. Kelly. I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to say the same thing I said 2 or 3 months ago. Why? Why?
I still
Okay.
have questions.
That's your decision.
I know.
Fine. Wow. The wheels move slow.
Are you gonna start singing the wheels on the bus?
I'm good.
Thank you, bud.
I go with the
Chairman.
majority.
Yes, ma'am.
I heard that it's coming up for a vote in June or July. Is that what I heard?
Yeah, we're bringing forward all of our recommendations with Neola this summer to take effect next year. So this is something
School
that.
year
School
next
year,
year.
correct,
Yeah.
school year. So this is just something that I wanted some input from the board on before even making a recommendation to the board. This is just a discussion to see where the board members are at based on a couple of different ideas that we had.
And when it does come on the agenda for vote, will that be all of the difference that you want to change at one time, or is it?
Yes, but this is the only one that really needs your attention, because it is about board meetings and, you know, how we run our business. Most of the policy stuff is just wordage to get alignment. We're not really changing much. But this would be a substantial change to our practice, so that's why I wanted to bring it for discussion.
Any changes within the Neola revisions that are any kind of change to current policy or additions to policy where we have not had a policy? Those will be presented to you like policy changes always are. You'll see the red line, you'll know the change, and separate from the formatting.
Alrighty, we ready for some questions? On option 2 for school board meeting agenda, it says 8 working days. Is it 8 or 7?
This is current policy.
Okay. Is there something, because it says, school board otherwise, however, except for good cause shown to the school board may take action? Is there something that we could have in writing if the office is closed, and I know that's good cause, but it doesn't really give any type of direction, like with the board chairman or the superintendent. I know we've done that in the past, but I feel like the policy should have something in there.
We can look at that. We had a unique situation where the deadline fell on a holiday over the winter holidays. So I did contact the chair, which is our protocol, and we did make an exception with regards to some speakers because it happened to follow on a holiday, and we didn't want to penalize a citizen because they missed a deadline due to a holiday. So, I mean, we can look at some verbiage.
I don't know why it always happens when I'm the chair, but it's happened to me before, and I think it happened when we were during the hurricanes too. And that's a good cause, but it should be discussed, like you follow protocol, but.
Yeah, and we
And I know there
always
was
try
a
to
board member who had a question.
defer on the side of the citizen and the community with regards to those issues. So whenever that particular issue was addressed with me, once the superintendent sets the agenda, but once the agenda is posted, it's the chairs. So we did have a conversation, Mr. Ingersoll and I, and Mr. Ingersoll approved the folks speaking, which are the folks that have kind of been coming to speaking at all of our meetings.
Yeah.
But I think that's just the right thing to do.
It is the right thing to do, but we should have something somewhat in writing, because it'll happen a couple more times, and we just want to make sure that we are covered. Mrs. Richardson did bring up some excellent points, and one of the things that I have talked about is electronic submission. So let's say you are stuck somewhere and you can't make it, and it's not on a 7-day thing, but you want to adjust something on the consent agenda. We should have a mechanism, and I'm not sure if other districts do, but we would, be able to have an app where someone could submit something if they're on their way or sitting at their desk all day and have an opportunity to do that. It should go to the board chair, and it should go to the secretary and the superintendent, so that people could know that, they want to speak. Same thing with unscheduled speakers too. I feel like coming up 4:59 as we're about to do the pledge is still unsafe. Someone starts walking up towards me, I'm gonna be like, "What are you doing?" I think all forms should go to the security officer in the back, and then that security officer brings it forward, and our security team does a phenomenal job, and they're all present and vigilant. They're not like undercover. So that, take it or leave it, that was my thought. The taping of unscheduled speakers, when I got on the board years ago, we didn't even have televised meetings. That was something that I somewhat pushed, and obviously had the support of a couple other board members. And the reason why we don't tape unscheduled speakers is because they come and they want to speak, but they don't understand sometimes the validity of what they say. And you can't throw another child under a bus. You can't throw someone under the bus without having the opportunity for someone to be able to rebuttal with quality information and be able to protect some children. This is a public school. This isn't government where we're talking about building roads and how it's going to affect. You're talking about, kids' lives, teachers' lives, and information is sensitive that goes out to the public, and you don't want to tarnish someone's reputation because, a divorced parent got upset or something happened, and that was one of the main reasons why we don't tape, or we tape it, but we don't broadcast unscheduled speakers. So I just wanted to make sure we knew the history behind that. On 5, public participation at school board meetings, number 3, it says 3 minutes for any person addressing the board at a public hearing, excluding time taken by questions from board members or the superintendent to the speaker at the public hearing. Is that talking about us rebuttaling? Because
It's allowing you to interact, it's authorizing you to interact with a speaker if it's a speaker related to a public hearing. But that person is not then penalized for that time you take. As a board, historically, I haven't seen this board typically do that, even in public hearings.
yes. It's always good to give them their 3 minutes and they're done. We start meddling with changing the rules for this hearing and everything else. I don't know how you feel. I mean, Jack, you've sat on other boards, Mr. Kelly, I'm sorry, where you sat on other boards and typically you don't have a dialogue because now you turn the public hearing into a debate. And Mrs. Richardson, I know you feel like there hasn't been that many guest speakers, but I think of the amount of time that you've been here, there's at least been 20% of public speakers here that we've had people come forward on unscheduled speakers. We've had them for the mask. We've had them for a personnel issue. We've had them here for construction, and we've had them here, and I had one other one that I just can't remember it now. So we've had 4 to 6 meetings where people, more than 5 people, close to 8 to 15 people have gotten up to speak on behalf of someone or a certain issue. And and that's a lot.
Previously, we've moved meetings to Fort Pierce Central's auditorium, and because we were aware that there was a large crowd coming, and those tended to be things like budget cuts in tough financial years and boundary changes, those type of community-wide impact discussions.
And I think we had one at Alapata Flats too when we were there. We just didn't have to move it because it was already big enough. So, yeah, I mean, when you start seeing an auditorium get packed out, you know you're in for it. Question, when they come up to speak as an unscheduled speaker, to be televised, to be a scheduled speaker, I wasn't sure, is it for one subject? Or can they come up a couple of times for two subjects?
Our policy does not clearly define that.
I didn't think, yeah. And then the other thing is someone says, I'm speaking here and I'd like to defer my time to Miss Holly.
We do not defer time.
Is that in the policy?
It's silent to deferring. It's current policy.
Well, I just want to make sure that's in there too.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm a little taken back on all of the questions you're asking for this entire form because I haven't had a chance to really look over all of it. I thought we were just bringing up the changes of option 1 and option 2 of what we focus on, or are we talking about the entire form now?
Well, I do, to your point, these are some thoughts that we had that we put together for the board. And, you know, it's interesting, not interesting, I think it's informative just to hear some of the comments from all of the board. It doesn't mean they're going to be incorporated in anything. I just wanted to make sure that we had a chance to discuss it. And, you know, just because somebody mentioned something doesn't mean it's going to be in there. I just wanted to hear from board members what your thoughts were, and that gives me some insight into your thinking. And then as this progresses, you know, I can have individual conversations with each of you about some of the things that I'll be making before I make an actual recommendation.
I really would like to emphasize what Ms. Jennifer said about security, bringing the forms up, rather than having anyone come up to Chris, because that is where, whether it's before, prior a meeting, or during a meeting, it's all concern for safety there. But security, if we can change that, and this is my recommendation, like Jennifer was saying, Mr. Richardson, that we have the people take the forms to security and have security bring up all the forms is a very good idea.
And that's procedural rather than policy, so we could change that. And one of the things that we're going to see with Neola is they recommend not putting procedures in the policy, but they have a separate section of procedures that correspond to their policies, so that could be very helpful to us moving forward.
Mr. Chairman, so
Hold on. I think, though, somewhere it was written in policy that they brought it to the recording secretary up front. I mean, so I don't know if I see it, and I know it was in one of them.
It's on the speaker form that they fill out, I think.
Yeah, and my,
No, it does say it.
No, it's in here, it's a policy.
It does
Yeah,
say
yeah.
with
So-
the board secretary.
But, yeah,
It just says file it with the board secretary.
yeah. So. But if it's in here, it's policy, take it out, it's procedure.
but to your point, real quick, and I don't mean to interject, Mr. Ingersoll, but to your point, Dr. Mills, I agree wholeheartedly. You know, in the day and age we're in, we just need to make some adjustments so that nobody approaches the board dais. That really should be our practice. And moving forward, we do need to make an adjustment in that as well.
Mrs. Richardson?
thank you. So when you say nobody, I'm just going to address that. When you say nobody approaches the dais, does that mean nobody approaches the dais at any time?
I think for the most part, when it comes to folks that, are being recognized, once the meeting is over, we always have people come up and talk to board members, and we're not discouraging that. I'm just saying whenever we're having a meeting, it's a little disconcerting when you just have somebody get up and start approaching the dais. That creates it creates a concern with security staff, and we just want to avoid that. You know what I mean? So when we're not saying that people can't approach board members, after every single meeting, all of you, for the most part, come down and talk to the public and constituents and those kinds of things. And that really occurs after the formal meeting is over. And you'll notice that our security team still is here. They remain after that, so that we still do have our security staff here. So we're not saying that never can happen. I'm just saying when it comes to once the meeting is, once we start the meeting, we want to make sure that anybody that's coming in, it's clearly defined that's our practice, that everything needs to be submitted prior to the meeting started, so that our security, it makes their job easier. Let's put it that way.
Mr. Kelly? Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Holly?
Just another comment, too, on stopping the time at 5 when the meeting begins, beyond the issue of safety. I've noticed in the past we've had people that are coming up even when our children are performing, and it's really distracting from that because we're watching the person approaching the dais and really want to be watching the children performing or honoring those that are getting awards and that type thing. So I'm really in strong agreement with having the cutoff time when the meeting is called to order.
Mr. Kelly?
Let me try to express my frustration in a different way, John, Mr. Prince, Dr. Prince. It's deja vu. What you just said to us 5 minutes ago is exactly what you said to us, and you can play the tape. We have a tape. 2 or 3 months ago. And we said that after the first of the year, because I wanted to make the motion, this is a simple change. It's a one-page change. Everybody seems to agree. The 5 o'clock thing, separate issue. We can bring it back anytime. This is simple. To say I need to hear the board again, you already heard us. In fact, we talked about this this should have been done 2 years ago. I just thought, it's just, maybe I'm getting real old and time is valuable, but it is. This is not an earth-changing thing. It's just something that should have already been done. But to say we have to wait a couple more months to make it's not the actual thing that we're doing. It's how we're doing it and why. And it's frustrating for me. I don't know. I don't think it is for anybody else, but it is for me. But again, I seem to sit over here all by myself anyways. But John, it is. It's like deja vu to me. We already went through this, and now we got to wait a few more months again. And I can see why constituents say government moves slow. Well, this is an example. This is not a big deal. One page, folks. That's it. So, and we need to go over some rules of our board also, because to make a motion and be told that I can't make a motion, I should be told that at the beginning of the meeting, sir. So I'm frustrated, and I will shut up. But I will always go with the majority, okay?
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Right now, I think we've had a good discussion. We have different viewpoints. I don't think, we somewhat have a majority, but I'd like to, Dr. Prince and Dr. Well, just to go back and take some suggestions, look over it, because it's just more than one page. I brought up a couple other points. Hopefully, you can massage them, do what you want with them, but those are just some of the insights that I see that will cause the board chair not to have to be in a compromised position. So.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, but as laborious as this is, we are talking about our community and what's in their best interest. 3 minutes, 5 minutes, it doesn't seem like a lot of time, or it's not that inconsequential, but at the end of the day, our community needs to be heard. So are they going to be heard with 3 minutes or 5 minutes? And that's the question really right now. And that is what's important. What we decide is worthy of our community. I will always say that we think globally, but we act locally. I really don't care what other counties are doing. I am more concerned about what we are doing in St. Lucie County District School. So they could be doing it there, here, and everywhere, but what is in the best interest of our district? That is what I care about, and that's how I make my decisions. So, and two, Dr. Mills brought up a good point. This was just given to us, like, after we started the meeting. I didn't have a chance to look at this, so, I'm not sure what's on this. I'm reading as we're going out, as you're turning the pages, I'm trying to follow with you, so, again, that's, I don't know what's on this. I know as, Mrs. Dr. Wild was going over what's on this, but, I think sometimes that we need to get these things ahead of time so that we can peruse them, we can look over them, so that when we come here, we're not wasting time. We know and we just get down to business. So, thank you. That's what I have to say.
Dr. Mills?
Ms. Richardson brought up another good thought. If we are going to, Superintendent, begin to have security, bring up the forms because of safety reasons, I think the practice of also allowing people to come up to the dais, to the podium, to come up to the board members is what I'm saying, shouldn't be. If the board members want to go down and talk to individual people, that's fine. But if we have a vote, for example, and somebody votes something that someone does not like, that doesn't have their right mind, they can come up afterwards and go directly to that person and do harm. So I think that we should also consider, if we're considering safety, we need to do it across the board. And so I just want to bring that up in consideration, to consider.
Well, we've had great discussions. I too just received this, but this is something that I've been thinking about for like the last couple of meetings. So in my mind, I already knew what I was looking for, and in my mind, I already knew some of the ideas that I had. So I put a lot of thought and effort into it. So when I read through this really quickly, that's how come I was questioning, is it in there and isn't, because I wasn't sure if I saw it or not, because I just scanned it. So yes, we all got this. I appreciate Dr. Well and Dr. Prince putting this together, but let's go ahead on to the next goal.
Okay, all right, so where's the clicker? Because I've got a couple things to cover first. Thanks, I appreciate it. Okay, so I just want to jump in. So first of all, a number of years ago, and this was probably about 6 years ago to kind of lay the foundation, we, as the deputy superintendent, I worked with Mr. O'Leary and his IT team to put together basically a dashboard, and this dashboard is used by our district leadership and our principals and our assistant principals and our deans and our guidance counselors, even our transportation department. And really it's looking at high return on investment metrics, okay? That could be absences, it could be grades, it could be discipline, it could be all kinds of different metrics that we look at to look at what really moves the needle on student achievement. So today I'm going to be talking about, my goals. And as part of my contract, to get in the weeds, 16A, with regards to my evaluation, I am required to provide goals to the board. Now those goals, I initially submitted to the board on June 28th at a workshop. Then we had a board retreat on this July 6th, and then the board ratified these goals after input in August. These are the 4 goals that we focused on at every single principal and AP meeting and dean meeting. We have every single one of these goals posted, and this is what I consistently share with you. Now, one of the priorities that we've already accomplished is with regards to the referendum. That was absolutely huge. That it passed with 67%. That was a huge win for the district. That's $23 million annually for teacher pay. That was really the biggest check on the board with regards to getting something done. Goal number 4 is district accreditation. We're finished with that process. I have a meeting with the accreditation folks in 2 weeks where I will, they'll share their feedback with me, and I'll also have discussions with the accreditation people. So we should know very soon whether or not we're going to have our accreditation renewed. But that's critically important for us because that means when a student graduates from St. Lucie County that our diploma has credibility. So that's an absolute huge deal. Everybody that you see sitting here has also been part of that accreditation process, and it is a significant amount of time and effort, not just from our district staff, but also from our school-based staff as well, working on that. So today, I want to talk specifically about Goal 1. Providing safe, secure, and predictable environments. And we didn't just include staff and students in our schools. We're also talking about buses, because buses are the first place that children interface with our adults. And I wanted to give a temperature check with the board with kind of how we're doing. I also want to, this is not for today's workshop. I don't want to get into the academic piece today, but I'm going to share with you some concerns I have that we're addressing, and I'll share with you how we're doing on that particular goal at a later workshop. But here are some challenges that we have that I need the board to be aware of, okay? The first, and by the way, you're gonna see a lot of animations. I would encourage you to not only follow on your paper copy, but also there's a lot of things that are gonna kind of fly in, and that's purposeful, so you can kind of, Mr. Frank in just a minute is going to get up and he's going to teach you a couple of things, and it's really important that you kind of follow along so that if you have any questions, there's a lot of information. We're going to dive into the weeds a little bit with you. But I want to talk about third grade. I have a lot of concerns about third grade. Our current kids sitting in third grade, and here's why. This is the first group of children that are a result of the pandemic. That means in kindergarten, they missed a whole 9 weeks, and then the following year, when we were virtual, half of our children were basically home, learning virtually, sometimes with a parent, sometimes with an older brother and sister. So you can see that huge, all of the time that this group of children have lost. Also, this is the first group of students that have been retained. So we've got about 300 kids sitting in third grade right now that are there with our kids that miss so much time. So we've got a huge backup in third grade of really struggling readers, particularly struggling readers. The other is sixth grade. Now this group of students, because of the pandemic, we didn't have testing when they were in third grade. So we have about 300 children that would have been retained. In the past, they'd be sitting in fifth grade, but now they're all in sixth grade. So we've got a real, third and sixth grade has a lot of lower level students that we're putting a lot of extra attention into those particular 2 grades to try to get those students caught up to speed. Now, I'm gonna put this on the table, but I just wanted you to hear this from me, because moving forward, I'm gonna be talking a lot more about this and kind of sharing how these students are doing with the board moving forward. But today is really about providing a safe, secure, and predictable environment. So we have a number of metrics that we looked at, and I also wanted to share with the board. I was initially planning a presentation on what our interventions were, but because of some other topics that came up, I had to shelve it. So today you're gonna hear, what have we been doing in our schools? What is our process to support our schools that when we see problematic areas? What is our process with transportation whenever we have a challenging bus route? What kinds of support are we giving bus drivers? So I want you to hear some of these things and see some of the things that we're doing that I think is out of the box thinking to address some of the challenges that we have. Now, here are the folks that are at play. So I wanted you to get a chance to see who they are, because some of them are in new roles, some of them are new faces, but Jakunti is our Director of Transportation. Giaconti's a rock star. You're going to hear from him today. Dan Frank is my chief of schools. Dan's my right hand with regards to what we're doing in our schools with the supports that we're providing. And Dan oversees our principal supervisors, okay? Terrence O'Leary, he's the butch to my Sundance. And Mr. O'Leary is going to be talking because Mr. O'Leary is responsible for our transportation department and what some of the things that he and Giaconti work together on with regards to that. Amber is in a new role, Amber Menarchik. Amber, stand up, Amber, so they see who you are. Amber is what I call not just a rock star former assistant principal, but Amber's been a dean in a number of different places, so she understands what it takes to be a dean. One of the things I wanted to do is make sure that the people that are training our deans are practitioners, that they've done the job. They walk the walk, they talk the talk, they understand that. Not just that, Esther Rivera, stand up. Esther's new with us this year. Esther's our Director of Student Services. Once again, I wanted to fill that role with someone who walked the walk, talked the talk. Esther's background is in some of our most challenging students, where she's been a principal and an AP, and also she was the principal of what I know is one of the toughest places in Palm Beach County, Forest Hill High School. Why do I know that? Because years ago I was an AP there. So I know how challenging that was. And Denise Rodriguez, she's executive director of teaching and learning. She's new in that role. And then Heather Rowland. So we got all these new people, and some new people, some same people, but different roles. So with that being said, I want to bring up Dan, and Dan is going to walk you through this, and then we'll take your questions.
Okay, good morning, Chairman Ingersoll, board members, and thank you, Superintendent Prince. So first I wanted to orient you to what we're covering today. When you look at the agenda, we're first going to start with where we've been and where we're going when we look at some discipline data. Then we're going to explain the process that we have, our progress monitoring process, and then the quality control checks that we have in place. And I'll walk you through a demonstration of our progress monitoring, and we'll walk you through the actual data of one of our schools and how we do the work. We'll highlight some examples of district support in our schools, and we'll share some new processes in place to support transportation, and then we'll follow up with an opportunity for you to have some questions. We started the year with the I Succeed initiative once Dr. Prince set his goal of providing a safe, secure, predictable, and learning environment. And we've already talked about Ms. Menarchik. One of our key functions that we're working on right now is with our principals, our deans, and our system principals. We're making sure, and we're focusing on data integrity. You're going to see when we look at the following slides how important it is to have all that information that's correct. The time of day a referral occurred, the location. We're going to need that information to make accurate and correct decisions. If you look, we focused on single school culture this year. It's a shift from dealing with consequences. We focus on providing very, very direct expectations and giving students the skills necessary to achieve those expectations. This year we conducted student surveys, so we got feedback from students, their perspective of the school, and we're working with principals right now, sharing that information. We started the work early this summer. We looked back last year and looked for students that had multiple early warning indicators, and those are a high number of referrals, a high number of absences, and a high number of Fs. And if you see that number there, the 1,047, those are the students, that's the number of students that principals, assistant principals met with students and parents over the summer or right at the beginning of the school year. And the idea was to establish a working relationship with a parent so we can meet on positive terms and we can set goals and expectation for the year. We interviewed the students and we had the students identify potential roadblocks. So maybe math, they have trouble concentrating in the afternoon and they thought it would be better to have math in the morning. Maybe they do better if they have preferential seating in the front of the room. So based on the feedback of the parent and feedback from the student, we established success plans for our students. And currently we have 1,047 of those in the district. I provide weekly discipline matrix reports to all of our principals and to district staff. Every week I send out between 10 and 20 reports. I highlight successes, but I also highlight concerns. I make the data where it's available to principals. They don't have to dig for it. It's on one single sheet, and they can monitor their progress towards themselves, but they can also monitor their progress towards like schools. And then finally, we worked with a lot of transportation staff, and we trained them to address student behavior issues. We have Tier 1 and Tier 2 and 3 processes. Tier 1 processes are things we have in place for all students. If a student needs additional interventions, we jump into Tier 2 and Tier 3. So I'm going to try to go a little slow. I get excited about data. So if you need me to slow down on anything, please just let me know. The graph you're looking at, what it is it's representing all the information from first semester for the last 9 years, between 2015 and 2023. So what we're saying is we collected data from August to December during the first semester only. So we're comparing the amount of referrals that took place or incidents during that time period. So it's a like time period for 9 different years. If you look at the bottom, you're looking at the level of referrals. And we're going to orient you over there to the last year, the 21-22 school year. That light blue number represents the number of level 1 referrals. And we had 5,349. If you look at that light green color, level 2, that represents the number of level 2 referrals or incidents, we're going to call them. If we look at level 3, the light gray, that represents the number of level 3 incidents, and all the way at the top, level 4, yellow, that represents the number of level 4 incidents. That number is outside the yellow box. So what we looked at last year, the total number of incidents that occurred first semester, that means from August to December, were 13,714. But what we looked at is the enrollment at the district at that time was 45,037 students. So how does that compare to this year? In the same time period, meaning first semester, we generated 13,655 referrals, but our current enrollment is 46,078 students. So if I look, we've had a net loss of 59 referrals, but we've had an increase of student population of over 1,000, 1,041. So to put that into perspective, if we go back to the 1920 school year, 18-19 school year, pre-pandemic, we had 15,029 discipline incidents. If we look at the population, it was 42,000. If we go all the way back to that high point during the 2015-2016 school year, we had 17,049 discipline incidents during the first semester. We had a population of 41,000. If we look at that difference, during the 15-16 school year, we had 3,390 more discipline incidents during the same time period as we had this year, but we had 4,611 less students. So if you look at the trend over the last 9 years, we've made a lot of progress. I know the 59 doesn't look impressive, but we're going to show you what that actually means when we dive into it in the next slide. Yes, ma'am.
Before you go further, am I assuming correctly that these are duplicated students?
We're dealing with the number of incidents.
Right, I get
So
it.
in an incident like a student will say cheating, for example. If a student was cheating using, trying to use their book or something,
Right.
that would be one incident, one referral.
Right.
If a student was copying off another or each other, that could be one incident that has 2 students involved in it.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to be sure in my mind, that's what.
You're welcome. So if we go into semester data, and this is what I want to show you where the real work, where we can see it. But before we start, Dr. Prince had an initiative that we want to address behavior at the lowest possible level. And no worries, thank you. What we want to do is I want you to reflect on if you've ever heard of the broken window theory. And that's if in an abandoned building, if one window is broken and it goes unaddressed, that over a few days, over a few weeks, there'll be multiple windows breaking, and the more windows that are broken, it fuels more windows being broken. It sort of outlines the idea that when disorder is not addressed, it escalates in both frequency and severity. So we've applied that to student behaviors, And what Dr. Prince has sent a very strong message is we don't want to tolerate any behaviors that are going to jeopardize the safety of campus, but also the learning environment. And we want to address behaviors at the lowest possible level. So if you look at this slide, this is the first semester data, and we're comparing information between the 22 school year and the 23 school year. So these are all the referrals that occurred prior to, from August to December this year compared to the referrals that occurred from August to December last year. If you look at the legend at the bottom, and this will be the same thing on all the other slides, when we look back at the 22 school year, that's going to be light blue, and when we're looking at the current year, that's going to be green. So if we look at our level ones, you're going to see that we had an increase of 1,358 referrals. And that's intentional because we are addressing problems at the lowest level. These are a lot of just classroom issues that are occurring that are very low level referrals. If you look at our level 2 referrals, because we are addressing referrals at the lowest possible level, we've had a decrease of 1,111. If we look at our level 3 referrals, you're going to see we have a decrease of 353 referrals. When we look at our level 4s, you're going to see a slight uptick. And I attribute that to 3 reasons. One, we've promoted the see something, say something to keep our campus very safe. And when students see something that jeopardizes the safety of campus because of the relationships with the administration, they are reporting it. The other is because of all the school violence we're seeing on TV. Students are taking an active role in ensuring the safety of their campus. And the third is the availability of vape cartridges, vape pens that students can get on the internet. The majority of those referrals are centered around vapes. If we go to the next slide, we're looking at discipline first semester, but we're comparing the difference between the entire district to some of our focus schools. Once again, this is data from first semester, and we're comparing the district results with the results at focus schools. And the light blue was last year's data, and the green is this year's data. So if we look at the district, we already saw that number. We're down 59 incidents. If we look at our focus schools, however, we're down 1,239 incidents. I wanted to go over our process of continuous improvement, and it starts with weekly data analysis and distribution. Every week, as I was saying earlier, I pull anywhere from 10 to 20 reports. I highlight our successes and I highlight our weaknesses. And it's sent to principals, it's sent to district leaders. It allows them at a glance on just a single cover sheet to see where they are with their peers and where they are with themselves. We take a detailed analysis of school data and we look at it at all levels. And we start with the school level, we break it down to the grade level, we'll break it down to a teacher level, we'll break it down to a student, and we can even drill down to minute details as far as the time of the day. Third, once we do that, we use that information to identify a root cause, and we develop an action plan. I kind of compare it when I talk to principals. It's about maybe the alarm goes off in your car that your front tire doesn't have air in it. You can pull over and put air in the tire, but you'll fix the immediate problem. But if you don't fix the leak, that problem is going to continue to occur. So we use the information we have to really drill down into the root cause to figure out what's causing the issue. And then we support and monitor the implementation of a plan, and we do regular progress checks. Our quality assurance to make sure this work is happening is number one is data transparency. When I send the data out, it's sent out to all principals, it's sent out to all district leaders. So everybody can see it, and they also have access to pull it the same way, real time, on their own. We do multi-level data monitoring. I meet with the executive directors every Monday, and we review the data. I meet with department heads and chairs or department leaders every week on Monday independently, and we look at data that impacts their department. And then collectively or collaboratively, every other week, we meet as a group, as a district, to see if we're seeing the same thing, because every department has a little bit of a different lens, but it all holds each other accountable. During that meeting is when we realign resources, and we determine what schools need and if we're making progress or if we need to change direction. And finally, for the superintendent, we do a monthly data matrix meeting where all the departments report out on the progress they're making on their individual goals. So as we saw,
Go back one slide, Dan. You just went forward, back one. All right. number 3 on the right, that's my favorite meeting.
As we go to the next slide, we've already looked at this. This just shows the progress during first semester. But what I want to do is I want to take you through a data dive, because a lot of people ask, what does progress monitoring look like? What are we doing? What does it mean? So I want to take you on a walk through one of our schools, and we're going to call it Focus School X. And these are the discipline incidents that occurred, and we monitor it by level, month, and year. So the same as the other slides.
Dan,
Yes,
I
sir.
don't mean to interrupt you, but what I wanted to share, and this is where I wanted to stop and talk about this real quick, because this you're going to kind of see one of our schools, and I'd be happy to tell you which one after the meeting. But this is where we see something and what our process is. Okay, we may have an issue here that we need to provide some support to, okay? And I just wanted to take some time as Dan walks you through this, and I think Esther is also going to talk about this too, because this is whenever we get Esther and Amber involved, and actually they'll go out and spend weeks at the school and work with the principals to talk about processes and try to help guide them. These are your specific problems that we can address and provide support on how to resolve some of those issues. So I wanted to take a little bit of time because I do think it's important. This is where the magic happens with regards to our school support. Okay, thanks, Dan.
Thank you, sir. So as I said, this is data specific to one school. We're calling it School X. And it's comparing the referral incident levels from last year to this year by month. Once again, if you look at the bottom, the data that is blue represents the number of incidents that occurred last year, and the green is this year. So first, if we look at August, we look at the levels. And we can see that there was a slight uptick in our level 1 referrals because we were addressing our behavior at the lowest possible level. If we look at that level 2, we went from 21 to 40. Once again, an uptick in norming behaviors at the beginning of the year. There's a slight decrease in our level 3 referrals, and we did have one new level 4 referral. If we move on to September, once again, and we look at it, our level 1s, last year we had 18 level 1 referrals, but this year we had 32. So we nearly doubled the number of level 1 referrals. But if you look at the level 2s, last year we had 99, and we decreased it, where we're only at a third of where we were last year at the end of the month. If you look at our level 3s, last year we were at 52, and we're only at 13. And if you look at our level 4s, once again, we had a slight uptick. When we go to October, you're going to see a significant decline in our level 2s and our level 3s. But we still had an increase in level 1s. And this is the work we're doing, is we're trying to address behaviors at the lowest possible level. That little disruptive behavior while students are walking through the hall, or a little horseplay, could turn into a level 4 referral, which would be an altercation or a fight. And we try to address it early. What I want you to pay attention to is when we get to November. When we look at those level 1 referrals, now we don't just look at this data at the end of the month, we look at it every single week. And when I look at it the very first week of the month, I'm comparing the current level, a number of incidents, to the number of incidents that occurred last year, the entire month. So what we noticed on that very first week, we already surpassed the number of level 1 referrals, level 1 incidents that we had the prior year. And that was alarming because we were on track, and also the same thing was true with our level 2s. The honeymoon was over, and student behavior was starting to have an uptick. When we go back to the broken window, we wanted to address it at the lowest possible level before it escalated. So when you look at this, this is what you're seeing. The data you're looking at is at the end of the month, but when we saw it the very first week, we saw an upward trend. So there were 179 referrals in the month of November. If you look at that, there were 100 level 1s, 60 level 2s, 19 level 3s. So what we're going to do is this is how we do our problem solving at the school. The very, very first step is we try to identify the root cause, like where is this occurring? We're going to dive into this, and the first thing we do is we look at by grade level. Is it isolated to one grade level? Is it isolated to one teacher group? Is it isolated to one student group? So once again, this is Focus School X. The data you're looking at, the light blue is last year's data, the green is this year's data. If we look at 6th grade, and we look at our level 1s, you're going to see once again we had a spike, and we quadrupled the number of level 1 referrals, but we cut level 2 referrals in more than half, And the same thing with level 3. If we look at our 7th graders, the same thing. We had a spike, we tripled our level 1s, and we cut our level 2s in half. If we look at 8th grade, we quadrupled our level 4s, our level 1s, and we cut our level 2s in half. So when you look at this, proportionately to what was happening last year, there's not an outlier. We don't see a grade level that's standing out that's having more challenges than another grade level. So this has us starting to look at a process. Maybe it's a systemic issue at the school. There's a system or there's a process in place that's impacting all 3 grade levels. So once we look at the grade levels, then we drill down to teachers. This is showing those same 179 incidents. They were referred by 56 different teachers. And there really isn't an outlier where you can see it is equally affecting each grade level, just as it is equally affecting all the teachers. The next level we look at is we break it down to the student. We have 179 incidents. Those incidents were generated by 108 students. Some of them had more than one referral. But if you look at it, there really isn't a student that stands out. During that month, you may have had one student that had, I believe the highest is 6 referrals. Most of them only have 1. So now I'm reflecting on the challenges. We're seeing a spike in referrals. It's affecting students equally, it's affecting teachers equally, and it's affecting grade levels equally. So now we take it down to one more level. Where are these referrals occurring? Here we go. 58% are happening in the classroom, 16% are happening on school grounds, and 12.8%, 13% are happening in the hallway. Now this makes sense because the students are spending most of their time in the classroom. So now we're back to it's equally affecting the teachers, equally affecting the grade levels, equally affecting all parties at the school. But with the data we have, and this goes back to the data integrity that Amber's working on, is if we don't have all the information input in the referral, we can't see the information on the next slide. So now we're actually going to look at the time of the day. When are these referrals occurring? Between 12 and 2 are nearly 40% of those referrals. Next in line is between 2 and 4:30. That's 30% of the referrals. And then if we look just before, at noon, we have about 16%. So we did a deep dive into, okay, what's happening at 12 o'clock? 12 o'clock is right when the first lunch ends. Then we started looking at the number of students in lunches. This particular school had 3 lunches, but the students weren't equally balanced in the lunches. The first lunch and the second lunch had much higher numbers of students, which led to a little bit louder environment. The students were not getting in trouble in the cafeteria. They were being very well behaved. But when you had more students transitioning through the hallways from the cafeteria to the classroom, that led to a lot of energy. And that energy sometimes led to referrals in the class or referrals in the hallway, but mostly that high energy went right back into the classroom and led to a referral occurring immediately after class started. So when we saw these patterns, this is where we had Ms. Rivera and her team come in. So I'm going to have her step up.
Good morning. As part of the continuous improvement process that Dan spoke with you about, I was able to assist the school along with my team, and the first thing we did was obviously conduct observations. As the data pointed out, we saw a spike in November's data, and we wanted to make sure that we developed a team that encompassed all these goals that we had set forth for the school. The team included Student Services, the Department of Student Services, and ESE. Our Administrative Special Assignment, Amber, who is phenomenal, she's our data guru. 2 behavior specialists and 2 MTSS specialists, which also cross into Department of Office and Teaching and Learning. So this was a collaborated effort between different departments. From there, we met with the school principal and we spoke with the ED to align our vision and goals along with their vision and goals and see what were the areas of concern. Were they noticing the same noticings that we had? Sure.
Mrs. Richardson.
Explain one more time. I'm sorry, I apologize. I am a Latina, and I am very proud in speaking quickly.
So this
diverse
is actually
population.
funny. Thank you, Mrs. Richardson, because this was my feedback to Ms. Rivera. What did I tell you when we had the debrief?
Slow down. And I will say, I even took
Yes.
I even took speech therapy for 10 years, trying to slow it down. It has not assisted, so just look at me and say, Ms. Rivera, slow it down.
Yes. Yes, yes.
Perfect, thank you.
No, thank you. That was funny because literally I've known Esther for a long time, and I said, this is the first time you're in front of the board. Talk slow, because she is a fast talker. Okay.
Thank you. So I'll try to slow it down, and I'll look for you, Ms. Richardson, to let me know. So when we walked the school campus, we had several different staff members at different points of the school at different times. And it kind of gave us an idea of what was occurring on the school campus, similar to what the data was showing. Most of the incidents were occurring after lunch, so we decided to speak with the stakeholders, staff, and students to identify what were their areas of concern and what did they see. From there, we noticed, obviously, that transition to and from the cafeteria was the catapult to create these incidents in the classrooms. We looked at a cafeteria supervision, cafeteria layout, as well as noticing the discrepancy that Dan has spoken about in the school lunches. Lunch A and B specifically had more students in that lunch than lunch C. As a prior principal, I am a systems-based approach, development and implementation of an action plan. We reviewed the master schedule with the ED along with the principal and really looked at how we could change that cafeteria schedule to make sure that it aligned with a balanced population. From there, we also reviewed and revised the procedures for transition to and from the cafeteria, including the teacher involvement in bringing the students and how they were interacting with the students when they were picking up the children from the cafeteria. We designated assigned seating in the cafeteria along with specific quadrants for staff members. The cafeteria had ample staff members for supervision, but one of our main goals was building those positive relationships with our students and our staff. By designating specific quadrants, a lot of times these students develop relationships with that specific staff member and could easily say, excuse me, I have a concern, or I would like to share something. From there, we worked with Terrence's team with IT to develop and improve the audio system to make sure that there was clear communication in the cafeteria between administration as well as the students. We also developed restroom procedures and expectations for students to be very well aware. You cannot inspect what you don't expect. So making sure that students knew exactly what were the communications and the expectations that we were expecting, and making sure that we were communicating those expectations to our student body. We also developed supervision maps. And then lastly, our team modeled for the staff there what it would look like. It wasn't just standing there in the cafeteria and looking at the students, but making sure you're building those relationships. Many of these students, I actually ran into them later on in the stores, and they're like, hey, you were in my cafeteria the other day. I'm like, yes, we'll be there again tomorrow. So making sure you develop those personal relationships with those students. From there, the next step was making sure we monitor and revise as needed the action plan. As anything, you have to monitor, monitor, and monitor for fidelity. Analyzing the data is extremely important, and we're so lucky that this district has Dan Frank, that is a data guru, that really hones in on the specifics of what the data is showing and what time and location. Our next step from our team was to start pulling back the supports. After being there for several weeks, okay, it's now time for the gradual release to the school. Instead of being there every single day, we were now pulling back 3 days, 2 days, 1 day. We reviewed the data, and if you have a system-based approach, you will have an expected outcome. And the outcome showed that behaviors had decreased, and our positive relationships were increasing. And the principal, I want to give credit to the principal, implemented a lot of successes and celebrating those successes, from staff versus students basketball games, dances, and different things of that nature. I even went and spoke with a student, and I was talking to him about his behaviors and how much he has improved. And he said, Miss, I did not want to miss shooting that basketball and that teacher. I was like, okay, I'm proud of you. So those positive relationships really, really influence this data as well. And lastly, this is really what Amber's team and Amber's doing with the deans. She is providing that ongoing support and training to APs and deans. A lot of the noticings from that groundwork, she was able to take back and implement it so that it was across the entire district, because obviously if something is occurring or if there's a systems like approach or concern in a school, and we did a systems-based approach process to improve it, it could be replicated throughout the district. And that was my role. Did I slow it down well? Okay, thank you.
Did they have that basketball, game already?
Can you hear, did they have the
That basketball game, did they have it already?
Yes, they did.
They did?
But they have monthly events now, and definitely, I know Dr. Prince can get that information to you of when the positive celebrations are occurring.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm back to look at some more data. So we want to see what was the result. Okay, did it make an impact? And what I want to show you, this is the very exact same slide that we looked at in the beginning, looking at the data by month. And what I'm going to do is blow up what I want you to see. This is the trend data from November when we started the process, on to December, and then January. So if we look at November, we see that major spike in our level 1 referrals, and we see a jump in our level 2. And one thing I wanted to clarify is I do know that November had 16 days, so we went from 233 referrals down to 179. If we look at December, you're going to see the trend. Once again, we have a spike in level 1, but look at the decline in level 2 referrals, where we're down 50% from the previous month, but we're 1/3 of where we were the previous year. And during December, I wanted to let you know that there's really only a 4-day difference in the month, so a decrease by 50% in the referrals, that wouldn't account for just the 4 days. We continue to monitor, and here we are in January, and we're now comparing ourselves to the end of the month data from last year. Currently, we have slightly more level 1 referrals. We're at 29 referrals. But if you look at our level 2s, last year at this time, we had 130 at the end of the month. Currently, with 5 days left, we have 13. Those level 2 referrals quickly turn into level 3s. When we saw last year the large spike at the end of the year where we had a jump in our level 3 referrals, it all started in January. If you look at all of our schools, we saw a peak, and that peak continued for the remainder of the year. And the idea this year is to get in front of it and address the behaviors at the lowest possible level. So now we're going to move on, and you can see the trend with our this year's data. And if you look at every level of referral, whether it's level 1s, where you're going from level 100 to 50 down to 29. If you look at those level 2s, we're going from 60 to 26 to 13. So there's a negative trend across all levels.
Everyone, Chairman Ingersoll, Board, Dr. Prince, thank you for having me this morning. So, as we all know, in our transportation department, a lot of the disciplinary trends that you see in the schools, you're going to kind of be reflective of what you're going to see on the buses as well. We have a pretty large department, roughly a little under 500 total employees in transportation. So in transportation, we kind of set the tone for nearly half of our students' day, and then we get the ability to see, how they're walking out of the schools. So with that mirroring of the discipline incidents that you see in schools is very reflective of what you see on the buses. And in the effort to also address those issues on our buses, we're going to first take a look at what our prior process was before Amber, Heather, and Esther came in to give us this PBIS and this additional CHAMPS training to equip our staff with some additional tools. Back. So previously, prior to the training that we received here in transportation earlier or late last semester, an incident occurs on the bus. The next step in the disciplinary process for a student is the driver just writes the referral. Now, here you don't see a lot of interaction, not a lot of interpretation. This is, I see something and I'm just going to report it, and where the chips fall, they fall. That doesn't give a lot of redress for the student. It doesn't give us the ability to work backwards and investigate, reapproach, or to say, hey, what is the actual root cause of this disruptive behavior?
Jakunti, may I interject real quick?
Yes.
I just want to set the table here because he's going to follow you or walk you through what was. This was our process, and then he's going to share with you what our process is now, which is very, very different. We've added some things. So as he orients you to the screen, this is, correct me if I'm wrong, you're going to walk him through what
Yes.
was and then what we are.
Right now,
Yep.
what we're covering is what was.
Okay, thank
right?
you.
So what was is you don't see a lot of interjection from a transportation perspective, all right? The driver notes an incident, and he immediately moves on to formal discipline for the incident. Now, an incident occurs, the driver then writes a referral, and now the school issues the discipline. Now, this is where we are as of our first semester. Now, when an incident occurs, we would like to we have the ability now, with the training that's been provided, and from taking a very measured approach as to where the area manager, our frontline management team, they get involved with the driver, the student, the parent, and the administrator from the beginning of the process. So for instance, something occurs that prior I would say, would automatically be a referral. Now, when that driver comes in and says, hey, I had an incident with said student, the area manager, the driver, will approach the parent, will approach the school. This is the part where we have the ability to go out on site. We can meet parents at bus stops. We are going out onto school ramps. We are taking an action-based approach to try to remove the formal side and get all parties involved.
And I wanted to interject here. What we try to do here is align our process with our bus driving and our bus drivers with what happens in a school. Okay, so if I'm a teacher in a class and I'm having behavioral issues with a student, before I write a referral, what do? I call the parent. I mean, hey, this is going on with little Johnny. You know, I'm seeing these kind of behaviors in class. I may move their desk, I may move their seat, I may make other interventions before I write a referral. We wanted that process to mirror what's happening in our schools. So we want the parent engaged, okay, that there's an issue on the bus before we end up writing a referral, okay? So that's where the area managers get involved, and we get the parent involved right away.
Yes.
How does the bus driver, whoever it is, get in contact with the parents? I heard you say
So
at the I heard you say sometimes at the bus stop, but a lot of parents are not at the bus stop. So how do you get to those parents?
So parent contact, we have all of our children's information. So generally speaking, an incident occurs, the area manager and the driver will make contact through a call. Okay, that's step one. Now, I'll just give you an example. I had an incident, occurred in PSL. It's an ongoing scenario in which the driver, the school, they didn't have the ability to reel the said student in. So, in that scenario, and I'm gonna use me as an example because this is me involved, I met the parent on area. I said, hey, we have something that's occurring. We've taken step A, B, and C, but the parent, she didn't have the ability to get to the school. She didn't have the ability to work with her student. So what I did in turn was I personally took myself out on the site. I made the arrangement where I could have the one-on-one conversation with the parent and the student prior to that student getting onto the bus, where we could hit a reset. Those are the types of things that we're doing. Because when you start getting into formal discipline, if a student is removed from the bus, because that can occur, they're suspended. One of the things is, number one, we want to change student behavior. I'm a driver. I have 60, 70 kids behind me. We don't have the ability or the resources as they would have in a school. But at the same time, that's placing all those students, if I have disruptive behavior on a bus, that places the driver and the students and the general public at risk. So prior to removing a student or letting scenarios escalate, we want to de-escalate, get the administrators, the parent, and the driver all on the same page. Because once the student's removed from the school, I've seen scenarios where there's insecurity in the home, They may not have supervision, they may not have food, and they're probably not going to learn for the day. So that's why we're trying to take the approach of getting everybody roped in. If the driver is making unilateral decisions on their own without any oversight, that can become problematic because we found scenarios when we dig into the data. If I have 300 routes on the road and I'm generating, let's say, 80 referrals in a month, well, I have 30 referrals on one bus. Is that a student issue, or is that going to be a management issue of the driver? You see how that goes? It gives us the ability to work with the student and at the same time address the driver, because it may be on us. We have salt in the game as far as making sure that our drivers, they're getting support, they're trained, and they have the tools to do the job. Because if they don't, then that hurts us on our retention side as well. So for us, this is an all-inclusive process that we've kind of put together where we have the ability to address the student, to also address our staff if there's a training or a need there, and at the same time, make sure that the school is aware of what's going on. So that's kind of how we play it. Does that make sense? All right. I can get wordy, guys. All right. So so continue with the current process. That incident continues. The referral gets to the school, and then the school now issues discipline. So here's the part where we get to dig backwards into our data, and we can find out if we have pointed issues, and we found that. So after the school issues discipline, the manager will meet with the driver. We'll let them know what's occurring with the student, how we're going to approach it when the student returns to the bus, if the person is removed for a short period of time, or how we found other measures to alter that behavior on the bus, because there's other things you can do outside of suspension. And then lastly, this is where we've been able to drive our behaviors down. We have the ability now with our power of BI, where we can see where hotspots are. We can see where trends are going and how we can intervene prior to things escalating. And during these weekly manager meetings with Terrence, my staff, and whatever school administrators that may need to be involved, we now have the ability to course correct before things go too far. And that's what our data shows us. So when you move into where we're 2022 versus 2023, you can see we received our training from Amber, Esther, and Heather, their team, in between late September, early October. We were trending upward just like how you saw in the schools. Here is when you can start seeing the actual impact of our new approach. We are pushing downward total referrals month over month over the last 3 counting, and I believe you're going to see the same thing in January as well, because we're trending lower than December currently, where we're now altering student behavior in a positive manner. We're placing students in a position where they can make it home safely without incident. And that's the ultimate goal of what we're trying to accomplish. Thoughts, concerns? Good? All right, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Shakundi. So I'm going to close it out with this, and then we'll take any questions. So I just want the board to see the staff. You know, you are who you surround yourself with. And, you know, I've got some real rock stars that I've developed these relationships over the last 7.5 years. One thing we don't do that is unique to our district, and a lot of the folks here are from other places too, because I do feel like we've hired the best from surrounding counties. But what you see is the right hand knows what the left hand is doing. In the past, I can tell you that that's not always the case with regards to involving transportation, because this one of the things as the superintendent, my priority is to make sure that we bring transportation into the fold and they're getting the same quality of training, and we're treating our bus drivers like real professionals. And I can't tell you how far our transportation department has come under Jacunti's leadership and his guidance and his professionalism, going from a bus driver shortage to where we have no shortage now. We've got plenty of bus drivers on deck, and that speaks also to the morale within that department of his leadership and how he's managed those folks. And I also think that they feel valued as our employees, that they're getting professional training with regards to management, just like a classroom teacher would get classroom management training. They're getting that training, and we're treating them like true professionals. So that concludes the presentation. I want to thank Dan for doing just a fabulous job as our chief of schools. I'm going to ask the executive directors of schools stand up, please. Mona, Latricia, Daryl. I want to let the board, this is where the rubber meets the road in our schools, because they're doing all the heavy lifting whenever we're interfacing with our principals, because they're bringing things to our staff when they're talking to principals and they're hearing their concerns, and they're working with the Department of Teaching and Learning or Safe Schools or Dr. Wild or Dan and their departments to make sure, and also Terrence as as the Chief Operations Officer. Thanks, guys. Don't want to get you tired over there. But we are a true team of people, and we have one mission and one goal, and that's to make St. Lucie County a destination district, which I think we're well on our way of doing. And I also just want to reorient the board to, to my goals. These are the 4 that we agreed on that I'm committed to trying to make sure that I've achieved all of these, and that's, as a system, that's what we're committed to doing. With that being said, I'll take any questions that board members may have.
Mr. Kelly?
Could I ask Dan a question quick, Dan? And I didn't write this down because I should have got a pencil from you, but I think way back in your presentation, and I didn't want to break in because we had a couple, you showed School X up there, and when you talked about your not just your implementation, but your diagnosis of everything, and you showed that on that School X, I don't know what School X was, or you picked a school that was represented the general problems that we had with the reports that we had on incident reports. I don't know where you got that school from, but that particular school you showed, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was 171 incidents caused by 105 students, something like that. Doesn't matter, but am I correct?
Yes, sir. I believe it was 179 and it generated
Something like that, yeah. Now, is that a consensus of, did you pick that particular school? And I don't know which one it is, but doesn't matter, because that's the general thing. Because where I'm going with it, to make it even short, I just talked to another school board member from a neighboring school district, and they seem to have a much even worse problem than we have with, there's a problem right now with all the school districts with, I think it's lack of respect that the parents aren't putting into, I'll be quite frank, respect for the teachers starts at home, and I don't know whether that's it or not, I don't know, but again, I'm old and I have different values, but I just want to ask you though, this particular gentleman told me that they found out that in their school district, and I won't mention how many people are in it, because then you'll know where it is, that about 500 students in this school district, the number of referrals that they get cause almost 80% of the incidents. So if I'm looking at that school you showed me, that's like, only 100 students. That's nowhere near that. So I would think myself, riding on a bus 100 years ago, riding on a bus, we'd have an incident. It's usually one kid on the bus caused all the trouble. So is it more like 500 kids can cause 80% of the incidents, or is it more like 100 students can cause 171 incidents?
Dan, I'm going to address this.
You know what I'm asking, right?
Okay. Yep, I do. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Usually it's about 2 to 5% of the students that create the majority of incidents.
What is it again?
2 to 5%. I mean, if you look at that, and here's where
it's even more than I thought.
But I'm just saying, here's where you make an important point, and I think that we've been very transparent with our data, is you've seen a spike in level 1 incidents, And that is methodical on our part, because we are telling staffs, we are telling teachers, we are not going to put up with minor infractions. We're going to put students on notice. We're going to get parents involved at the get-go, that we're not going to tolerate that kind of behavior. And I've said it, if you ask any of the staff, every single principal meeting, I said, I don't care. We're going to get, our focus this year is have behaviors under control. That is our priority. And that's really all about early intervention. The second part of your question is with regards to how that school was selected. That school was selected because it was a very problematic school last year. So we knew going into the beginning of the year that we had a couple of schools that we are going to pay extra attention to, that we're going to provide additional support, just like you would a child that was struggling. We're going to make sure that they have all the support they need to get off to the right start. That's where Dan talked about the I Succeed, is we know who those 2 to 5% of the students are. That was the 1,047 students across our district, okay, that had a history, okay, of challenging behaviors. And it's not just behaviors, it could be grades, it could be absences. But we wanted to start those kids on the right foot. Let's have a meeting with the parent, and let's make sure that child is going to be supported from day one, that we develop those relationships and supports right away. Why are we waiting for something to happen? Okay, so I'm kind of answering a couple of your questions in one statement, but that's been our goal all along, is to be preventative rather than reactionary. And that's another thing that we've done with transportation, is we're going to be strategic. We're going to front load our training. We want to make sure things don't happen. We don't want to respond to them after they've happened. And if they do happen, we want to have an appropriate response that supports the child, not just supports the child, but keeps our staff safe and supports our teachers as well, so they feel supported. And mostly, too, supporting our principals, so they know, hey, principals already are overwhelmed. They have so much on their plates, and they need to be able to pick up the phone and call Esther or call Amber and say, hey, can you come and spend a couple of days on my campus from an outside perspective, see what's happening, and help me, what can I do moving forward to resolve some of these issues? And as a district, we take a deep dive. What time of the day? Where is it happening? What can we put into place to make sure that we mitigate some of these issues? So thank you for your question, but those are really good points that we really work to address.
So I got the part, less than 5% of the students cause the majority of incidents. When we talk about majority, what are we talking about? 80% of them, 90% of them, 5%?
Mr. Kelly, it could be, depending on the school, it could
I know
it
it's a
could
rough
be 80 to
question. I know.
95%.
What was it last year? Do you have figures?
Not off the top of my head,
Okay,
but I'd be happy to get it for you. That's an easy metric that we
Yeah.
can pull.
Yeah, that's a much lower percentage than I
Yes,
thought.
absolutely.
So,
And you saw with our data, I mean, we're carrying, back in 2015, we had, a couple of thousand more discipline referrals, and we had 7,000 fewer students. So proportionally, I think when Mr. Gent was the superintendent, behavior's always been on our radar. It's not a new thing this year, you know what I mean? That's something, as the deputy, I was always working to support, but I also, as the deputy, knew that we didn't have the resources I felt we needed to be able to address these things, especially post-COVID. And that's one of the reasons that I literally created Amber's position, because I wanted to make sure that the deans were getting the proper training that they needed, and also that training was being done by somebody who did the work. It's so important from a credibility standpoint that you feel like when you go into training that person did your job and they were really good at it. That's really, really important. And we wanted to make sure that practitioners were the folks that were actually doing the training. But I'd be happy to get that information for you. That's easy.
okay, so that 5%, do we have a plan, and I don't want to use the word attack, do we have a plan that we can work on that 5%? Because that seems to be the problem.
And
We
that's,
just
and,
get on that 5%, and you showed some outside organizations that you were using for elementary, and I can't remember them. Again, I didn't write them down. We went through quick.
And to my point, that is our plan. That's
Yeah.
our I Succeed. That's what we're doing. We've met with all of those students that we've identified, and we're continuing to track and monitor those students throughout the year, because actually Dan drives the principals. Probably, if I ask the executive directors, that's a point of a data point. Whenever an executive director goes into a school, they've got a list of the students that they're supporting, okay? Because we've got a list of those kids that was generated for me, and they know I'm very aggressive about supporting these kids. But those are the students, that 5%, Mr. Kelly, are the students that we have been supporting since the summer, and every 2 weeks when the school supervisors are going out to those principals, the first question they ask is, how are these kids doing? How are we supporting these students? And I think, as you can see from the results of our data, our level 2 and 3 incidents have been dramatically reduced, and our level 4 incidents, which are the most serious, Mr. Frank, I think, is spot on by saying our kids, what they see in the media, they are saying something. When they see something, they say something, and that's also a tribute to our administrators and the teachers, because there's a trust level with our kids that they're actually reporting things that they're concerned about. So I think that our plan is working.
Okay, thank you. So not all kids are bad?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
There's bad behavior that's not bad.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
I want to say thank you for what I'm hearing that we are doing in this area with the district. I know how it was as a bus driver, because I was a bus driver. I lasted 1 year. I was a substitute bus driver. My husband lasted several years. But substitutes is what I have not heard anything. I want to know what we're doing regarding the substitutes, because I was also a substitute teacher. So I know the experience of a bus driver, and that prior, that you said before the training came in, I was the bus driver who set and wrote referrals as a substitute. And I would spend 1 hour to 2 hours sometimes writing referrals after I finished, because I felt bad for the people that would come behind me if I didn't write the referrals up and let the kid get away with it, or the kids. The next person that would come behind me would get it, it just as bad or worse. And let me say this, I was the bus driver's favorite substitute, because when they came back to their bus, they had they didn't come back to chaos because they had a substitute driver. Okay, so I know about the referrals, and now to hear that there are other things being added to help with that. But go ahead, you came up.
So, two things. Number one, our entire staff has been trained. That includes sub-drivers and sub-aides. Now, to keep this on course and to not fall into a position where we have to train, 400 staff members in such a short time period, we've incorporated the PBIS CHAMPS training into our orientation now. So we had to add a couple hours to the class, but every member that's onboarded to our staff now, they get that initial training. Mm-hmm. So we're keeping that in place. Now, speaking to the quality of a sub-driver as you, I probably would like to have you back then. Okay?
Say that again. I missed that. Say that again.
No, I could use more subs like you is what I was saying.
Oh.
But yeah, but that's kind of where we are. So right now, it's maintaining that training throughout and not falling backwards. So every new member plus our existing staff, everybody will receive this training moving forward.
And I must say that the bus drivers, because I know plenty of bus drivers, they love you. You have done an excellent job since you have come on. And I know bus drivers that absolutely love their jobs, and you're part of that reason. So we want to thank you for your work on that department. Also, but again, I'm asking about substitute teachers in the classroom. I was a substitute teacher in the classroom. It was horrible for the sub in the classroom. And what I would do is send that kid out, because I know that as Mr. Kelly said, usually it's just that one kid. If you catch it with that one kid, you don't have the problems with the rest of them, because they can stir it up and get it going, and then you have chaos in the whole classroom. So I want to know what we're doing, if we're doing anything, and if we're not, well, I get, if that bus driver, I would send the kid out, and they would send the kid right back in. and the kid would laugh and start acting out again. Send them out again, they would, now, we're going back years ago now, and then send them right back in the classroom. And it was so, you throw your hands up, you can't really teach, you can't do anything because you're just trying to keep order. So I'm looking out for the subs. So tell me, what are we doing
Well,
in that
the
case?
substitutes get orientation, they get training, they get some classroom management training. Helen, did you want to come up and speak to any of that? Or, but also, what we try to do also, and then, Helen, you can piggyback off of what I say. I know as a former principal, what I did is I cultivated relationships with substitutes that I thought had great relationship skills with kids, and then I would encourage them to pick up all our jobs. So we kind of, that relationship is so critically important with our substitutes from a school leader's standpoint, is to make sure that they have the relationships with the staff so that we are supporting them, because those are real school-based issues that come up, and we want to make sure our substitutes feel supported from one school to the next. But Helen, you can address this.
Yes, I would agree. I think Dan and I both were coming up to answer that question, because we do provide the CHAMPS training that Jakunte was talking about to our substitute teachers when they start. But I think really it's that ongoing support from the school-based administrators at the school and those relationships that carry that forward when the substitute gets on the school campus. So I think Dan was going to add that he has asked the principals to ensure that they have a good system on their school campuses to support the substitute teachers. And I was a substitute teacher, so just like you, I totally understand the need for that. So we do provide that training.
Okay, thank you.
Just wanted to say quick, Donna, my wife, still, she's, she's a long-time teacher in St. Lucie County, and she still substitutes 5-6 times a month, and she still loves it. She loves it. She says some things are better, some things are harder, but she still enjoys it. And one thing I have heard, not from my wife, from other people, that we do employ some, especially my wife's in special ed, some of the special ed, we do employ, correct me if I'm wrong, some outside teachers that we use for a month, or we bring them in, and they're from I don't want to say consulting firms, but these firms from the outside that supply special ed teachers.
Dr.
And math
Wild,
teachers.
you can come up. We do use outside agencies specifically for
Yeah.
special education.
Yeah.
And Helen, you can address that real quick.
I just want to say, over the years, I've heard good things, but I've heard a lot of bad things about the employment of, because they're not trained by us. I don't know if am I online or?
That is primarily out of Heather Rowland's shop, and they are behavior specialists, behavior
Yes.
tech support, paraprofessional support in the behavior side of things, so it's additional layer of support, or licensed personnel. So we do have some professionally licensed folks as well that we contract with, not classroom teachers.
Okay, but do they work out well, or no?
Heather, would you like to elaborate on that?
That's what I'm asking. I'm putting it on. I'm asking you a tough question.
It's multiple agencies.
Because I understand sometimes we bring them in, John, behavioral techs to different schools, and this is over the years, not just now, because I'm plugged in. I got teachers in the family. And we bring them in, and some of them are great, and some of them, 2 days later, the principal will go in and say, go home,
Yes, sir. We do have agreements with multiple agencies throughout the district, and one thing that we have implemented this year so that we can address some of those school-specific concerns is an onboarding process for our behavior technicians that are linked to our agencies, so that we can train them in what to expect when they arrive on the school campus. Just as any employee, we want to ensure that they're set up for success. And if there are issues, we communicate directly with the agency to ensure that ongoing communication about their job performance. So there have been situations, to your point, where we've had to remove behavior technicians from our campuses, but they've been very isolated incidents.
Oh, good. That's
Yes,
good.
sir.
And then the final question, and I'll leave you alone, and it's a tough one. Why don't we just hire more behavioral techs and not do that?
That is a
It's a
great
tough question, I know.
So as with many licensed personnel, including our mental health professionals, our school psychologists, there is a critical shortage. So we always want to directly hire individuals, and we have those positions available. So if you know of anyone, I'm going to say this publicly, we need you. With that said, we want to ensure that our students are safe and that we're providing the support on our school sites. So we contract with these agencies while we're currently actively looking to hire direct hires.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. It's a critical shortage. And
Yes, sir.
you answered the question. I figured that's what you're going to say. But also, those behavioral techs, they go directly to the 5% kids that we're trying to,
Some of
straighten
them
out.
do, yes, sir, and there are students with disabilities that require that individual level of support.
And God bless them.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Superintendent, are we done?
Yes, sir, that concludes everything I have.
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
For Mr. Chakun, yes. You kept saying in your speech that we did not have the ability to do something, but now we have the ability. What changed?
Well, I don't
What
wanna
gave
say,
you
well,
that ability?
Let me clarify my words. I don't want to say we didn't have the ability. We've always had the ability. I think it was shoring up the actual process. Two things occurred. The first thing that occurred was making sure that the driver's aides, the actual staff, had the behavioral training that they needed to address the student. That was step one. Step two, now this is probably the part that you're questioning on, is the inability that I may have spoken of. I would say it's more of an organizational attack as to how we approached student behavior. What that required was an actual process that is measured, followed, and then we go backwards and look at. That wasn't in place. That ability there is what we now have, and we have a reporting structure on it. So that reporting structure now, number one, it requires input from the area manager. The area manager has to come to the table, and they have to be able to speak to incidents. They have to be able to speak directly to referrals. They have to speak to their specific work group, all right? That information is then rolled upwards. That's where I approach Terrence. That's where I approach administrators. That's where Mr. Hardison, Ms. Griffin, Ms. Cruz, Mr. Petroff, Mr. Carter, that's my senior level management staff. That's where the heavy lifting gets done on the background. So we're looking for the outliers. Those outliers is where we take the next step of approaching the parent. And then that should have already occurred, but I mean, like, there's another level in which you can go with it, is what I'm saying.
Jakunti, may I just interject here? So this goes back to, whenever you have that goal-setting process. And I laid out, okay, safety, security, predictable behaviors, and I added the word on buses, okay? Because that's important. That's the first experience that somebody has with our staff. So if I'm going to mention buses, I need to have a process in place that is going to hold people accountable. And that's not just me as a superintendent. It's got to include Terrence. It's got to include Jakunti. That also adds additional layers, not just that, but I need a data set to look at, which where Terrence comes in, where I said, I go to Terrence and I say, okay, I want to see what our problematic routes are. Where are all of our referrals happening? What buses? What bus drivers? And it's not about penalizing anybody for anything. It's like, okay, let's problem solve. Do we need to separate students? Do we need to have certain drivers on certain routes? I've got high relationship drivers. Why don't I put them on this bus? Okay? There's a lot of strategy that goes on that impacts a child's entire day. So to Jakunti's point, they've never been directed to do that. They've never been asked to do that. But to me, in conversations with Mr. O'Leary and Jakunti, it's like, okay, this process is in place. We're doing this in our schools, so we need to apply these processes to our buses and to our bus drivers because they need to be treated as professionals, and we need to have accountability processes in place. And we already know, to your point, he's a rock star. I mean, they love him, okay? So those things are so critically important that I need to leverage his relationships, okay, so that kids have better experience on our buses. And that goes back to, what am I being evaluated on? Those 4 goals. Goals number 1, safe, secure, predictable environments. Now, what are the metrics there that we're going to be following? And this is one thing that I wanted to share with the board today. How are we doing? And also share with the board, what are those processes?
Mr. Chair, just 1 or 2 housekeeping things. I have 4 or 5 I'd like to talk about, but I'm only can do 1 or 2. It's been 2 years, over 2 years, Donna, we don't have an official picture of our school board. We do not have a picture. And every time I see news or something on TV, I just saw one at Christmas, and they showed a picture of the old school board from 3 years ago. And I've had people say something to me about it. We don't have an official picture. And just a consensus, could we maybe get together before one of our regular meetings, or could you set it up, and maybe you want to do it or not? I don't know, but we don't have a picture, which I find concerning in many ways. The second thing.
To clarify,
Okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm just, we've got the glamour shots up front. Do you mean picture
A
of
picture
everybody
all of us
together, the board members with the superintendent?
Underneath the thing, like,
Okay.
so when they show
Got it.
the news, they
Okay.
say, here's the St. Lucie County School Board.
I'm serve at the leisure of the board. If I'd be happy to coordinate that.
I'll wear a
before board
suit
meeting.
on Tuesday.
Okay. And the second thing, which is very concerning to me, and I have not brought it up during the meetings, I need to know, I'm not clarified on the rules of, we used to call them rules of council on the city council. We run in Robert's Rules of Orders, that we have rule of the chair. Could I meet with you and our legal advice, and then after we meet, could you meet with him? Because I can't meet with him, because there are questions that I'm very concerned about some of the things we do.
Are we talking about Molly Shattuck, school board attorney?
There's problems with our regular meetings, I mean, and nothing to do with the actual subject, but when there's a motion on the floor, to have another motion made during that motion, it goes against everything, every board
Yeah,
I've ever been on.
I did
I've
wonder about that
never seen
myself.
that, and I had her reply, and nothing to do with you. It was, you don't make that decision. She, the response that we got, I did not agree with it, and I'm not gonna bring it up then, because, you have every right to do that, but I just, nothing to do with it.
Mr. Kelly, I'm welcome to sit down with Molly before the board meeting and have a discussion, and
Okay.
then
And the other
discuss
one
it with the
is
board.
very important to the public. We had I missed a meeting recently. We had the board, the last 3 out of the last 4 meetings of last year, we only had 4 people on the board. It needs to be told to the general public that if there's something on that concerns them, we don't do ordinances and things like that like I used to, but there are things that go before people that are concerned with, that if there's only 4 people or 3 people, that a 2-2 vote makes it dead. If there's something that you have on the agenda that you're concerned with, and the vote is going to be 2-2, they need to be told, do you want to move that to another board meeting to have a full board vote on it, or do you want to have it voted on tonight? That's never announced. I've always had it announced at fire board meetings, TPO meetings, anything that we do that's going to concern somebody that, they need to know. If it's a 2-2 vote, you lose. So that's never been announced, and it concerns me, and I've only had one person, say something to me about it, but it's something that, whether it should be announced, or that's up to you, and I think it should be. I think the general public needs to know when there's a 2-2 vote, when there's only 4, when you have 3 people, it's got to be all 3, or it doesn't pass. Some people don't know that.
that's a board chair, question. I mean, I can give you my opinion. I think that if we've got a board member that is not gonna be here, notify the board chair, who really probably should let Chris know, and Chris needs to probably, and this is just, I mean, I'm I'm spitballing here the way I think it should work, and then Chris would send out something to the board members to let them know that we're gonna have a board, and especially let me know, because to your point, that is an important point. With regards to an agenda item, because I don't know how you all are going to vote, or if you're going to have an issue with an agenda item, which goes back to, I do like to know in advance if you're going to pull something, so I have staff ready to speak on it if you are going to pull something. But I would also like a courtesy call, or just give me a heads up, even if you not just notify me, or notify the board chair, but give me a heads up so I can make sure I at least have a conversation with Chris that she can send that out so that we all know who's going to be at the meeting. I agree. I do think that's important, Mr. Kelly. It's just the process of it is really up to the board.
Mr. Kelly, I'll get with Ms. Shattuck and talk to her about that. I totally forgot about that because it did take me off guard. I was like, what? But yeah, I'll have to look at the book and read that over again. But Dr. Prince, you did bring up something that I do appreciate, is if we're not going to be here, do contact Mrs. Harrison. But anytime when we do meet with the superintendent, it's always good to let him know ahead of time what we're talking about. So like you did, Mr. Kelly, that way we don't catch the superintendent off guard, and he has an opportunity to look up things. I know that every time when I need something, I try to give him a couple days' notice. So it just helps out the flow of communication, and I'm not sitting there forever listening to him. I just get to the point and I know what I'm doing. So,
Well, just here, I did tell Dr. Prince that I was going to bring this up, didn't I, sir? I did. I always meet with him before, and it's a good plan to do that.
No, it always is. It always is.
And again, it has no bearing. When you're passionate about something, it's okay to be, but it's just the rules.
Of all people, passion today, you really demonstrated that.
I'm not passionate, I'm frustrated, but that's okay.
Frustration, passionate. you did.
Mr. Kelly, since you keep looking at me,
I don't want to offend you.
I thought he just didn't want to look at me.
We have an attorney who I think you need to go to, like you said you were going to do, and get clarification.
Yeah.
Because if it's the law, and if it's Robert Rules of Order, or if it's something that we have in our procedure that you may not know of, or our policy, or, as she addressed the issue that you're talking about at that particular board meeting, that's happened before as well. And that's how we've addressed it, which if it is not voted to go to the next step, it falls. So that's part of what is. Now, if she's doing it wrong, or, whatever you might think, that's something you go with her about. But that's how that panned out. So you don't have to keep saying if it, I'm not talking.
We just need to read the book.
Deal with your attorney on that.
Just to be clear, it wasn't just that. It's other boards that I've been on with huge issues, and it comes up, and there's 3 or 4 people at the meeting, not just the fire board, but city council, huge issues, and you get told on a huge issue, and I won't go, and this one goes way back, where the mayor actually said, when we were going to vote on an issue, said, I'm taking this off the agenda. I'm taking it off the agenda because there's only 3 of us here. And I never knew all my time, and no one else did on that board, knew that the mayor had the rule of the chair. We did not know that at city council. It was a huge thing. And she did take it off, and it was a rule of something that the council had voted on a couple of years before. And we were all astounded that she could take it off the agenda. And I know it was pretty huge. It was the annexation of 42,000 homes. It was pretty huge, and she had the right to take it off, and it didn't deny her. That was a rule, and I'm going to live by it. But I go back to those things that I've been through, and it can cause quite a problem if you don't know the rules. And I had reservations about it, just like you did. I've never had that happen. But, it's happened, but they were not. It wasn't allowed.
Yeah.
If it is, then I'll live with it.
On top of that, Mr. Kelly has brought up my schedule. I will not be here in March or in June. So,
Thank you.
So I'm glad I remembered. So people are making conversation. Yeah. Anybody else?
I find it very funny that all these things that Mr. Kelly is bringing up right now are actually some of the things that I discussed with the superintendent yesterday. So, is this a coincidence or?
No, it's not a coincidence, Mrs. Richardson, because as we discussed, these are things that whenever I don't know something, board members ask me, and that's why I brought it up to you. But even before we had a conversation yesterday, Mr. Kelly and I spoke a while back, and he said he was going to, everything that he's brought up are things that he said he was going to bring up today, which I communicated to you yesterday.
Just making sure. Thank you for the clarification.
And again, Mrs. Richardson, Ms. Hawley, Dr. Mills, and Mr. Kelly, this is the time to bring those kind of questions up, you know, that we can workshop them and talk them out. So I do appreciate all of you all bringing those questions up.
And that is very good, because there are some things that, it's late now, so I'm going to not say anything, but there are some things that at our next workshop maybe that I would like to discuss as well, because we are not under the Sunshine Law when we are here. So there we go. So do I need to give you what I'm going to speak about?
Yeah, sure. If
Okay.
you want to speak on it, but really it's up to the consensus of the board on what topics are addressed.
I'm just so confused about protocol
Yep.
here right now, who to give what to and when to give it and all that stuff. So I guess I can't get with you, so I'll get with you about
Yeah.
Sunshine Law and all that good stuff.
So
Thank you.
Yeah, so basically, I've been asking for like the last couple meetings, you know, just, hey, if you got a workshop item, please give it to the superintendent so that we can go down and schedule what we need to do as a team here. And, you know, obviously, one of the things that I got bumped off this week was I wanted to discuss the library books and make sure that we're ready to move forward with those. Because, you know, sometimes during my chairmanship, I'd like to say that we dealt with it, and I don't want to deal it off to Ms. Hawley. I just want to go ahead and take care of it. So
How much longer are we going to deal with this library books?
well, I was hoping to vote on it in March, but obviously I can't. But I wanted to have a workshop first and then vote on it so that
We have some discussion.
Yes, ma'am.
About it, so we don't have it on the dais, we have it here.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that makes sense,
Yes,
because I'm all for discussions
Yeah.
and getting point of views. So
Yes.
thank you.
So, but that was supposed to be this workshop. But obviously, we wanted to talk about goals, and we had some other things up here and come up that we went ahead and we're doing it at another time.
Thank you.
So, but we want to be sensitive to your time, and sensitive, obviously, we have a lot of people sitting here, so time and making sure that all the board members are heard is important. Anything else? All righty, thank you, and we're going to go ahead and close this meeting.